Hey everyone, and welcome to the Off-Site podcast, where we chat all things construction, technology, and everything in between. My name's Carlos, and I spend most of my days talking to construction teams about how they deliver projects.
And my name's Jason, and I spend all day building software that construction teams use to deliver projects.
So today we're going to talk about image capture technology, the sale of Aleco Software, who owns Power Project, also known as Asta, and Hinkley's latest geospatial portal. So first up, image capture technology. It's hard not to notice this stuff. If you go to any exhibition style event, you'll see robots like Spot the Dog. You'll see drone image capture like SenseOut. There's a lot of it at the moment. But in the news this week, we've seen a new, what they call a bespoke camera and buddy system, which basically captures 360-degree views of sites as it moves around, I guess, corridors and floors. And this creates 3D models. Jason, it all looks really cool as usual. What do you think it's actually used for?
I find the image capture space like super interesting. If you think about the problem, there's like different layers to it. So you've got like the first bit, which is like just being able to capture the site. And like that's, I think, not that interesting. Google Maps have been doing it for ages, right? They drive around the street.
When you say capture, you mean literally an image of what it looks like?
Well, no, they like a lot of these platforms have some form of camera on a helmet or camera attached to something walking around the site, and the ability to sort of take captures and then stitch that together into some sort of navigable space. It's essentially like Street View, right? Google Street View. That bit is like, I think, pretty standard technology. Yeah. There's like then some people are doing that plus robot/drone, so automating the process of the capture. And like, yeah, that's interesting. I think like I've seen ones which do like a little crawler robot that drives around. Obviously, as soon as you've got a stair or any uneven ground, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
Spot the Dog is a regular for like demonstrations of this, but I think it's like not there yet in terms of actually being able to like walk a site. Because obviously in the construction site scenario, the site changes every day. The paths are not very well defined. Maybe a building is a bit more consistent, but like if you're talking about any type of like civil infrastructure or anything, there's obvious limitations of the ability to capture that consistently. Anyway, that's a whole challenge that I from what I've seen is still not there yet. But then there's like this third piece, which is, okay, you've got a situation on your project where you've captured every day this equivalent of Google Street View every day. But what the hell do you do with that? It's like nice to be able to go back and look at the data, but how does it actually drive value? I guess it drives value from like a claims or having a record if you had a claim to be like, when did something happen? But to find out when it happens, unless you can turn the images into something structured, you have to just go back through time to find when did that change or whatever. So the third piece of this space is like some sort of artificial intelligence understanding what's been built and then outputting some data that's structured, whether that's like tracking progress of a schedule, doing measurements to check that dimensions against the drawings. And if you look at the state of platforms in this space, it's still pretty early. Like I would say one of the leaders is like Open Space, and they have a product that's trying to do this. And I think they can do walls and ceilings maybe, or like that's still in a beta. And then they've got even earlier betas for things like checking if doorways are in. So like it's still a ways off being able to generate that in any meaningful way. But without that piece, it just seems like a lot of captures. It's like, it's a nice to have.
Yeah, a lot of it feels like it's like this flashy thing which is funded by an innovation project. So there's lots of cash to go and do stuff, but like what is the actual meat and veg at the end of it? You mentioned
totally believe it. Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned about the ability to actually understand progress against, I don't know, a BIM model or something like that to say, right, this door's been built, this wall's been built. Obviously, QS background or QS hat on. QS is famous for never going to site, right? You must know the running joke. They just sit in the office and they'll do anything to not go to site, put boots on and get dusty.
Like a dream come true then.
Yeah, nice and warm, sit with your coffee. But the big thing for QS each month is they got to pay subbies, right? So every month you have to pay subby and you have to pay them based on what they have done and maybe like a forecast of a week ahead to the end of the period. And lazy QSs would go sit down with the engineer and go, right, this list of 10 things, have they done them? And they get an idea about what they've actually done. Good QSs who go out on site and not do a measure. You're not actually measuring, they call it that, but you're just looking at stuff and thinking, oh, how progressed is this? Shall I pay them? Because if you pay them and then they don't turn up the next day and they haven't done it, you're up shit's creek, really. So I could see that being the benefit, but I guess it's going to be this long path of trying to get there, and we're going to get all these gimmicky stuff type things to try and experiment.
I think I totally believe in the space. I think that projects in the future will all do some sort of capture. I think the capture technology will depend on the type of project. So obviously like a highway project benefits from drones that are flying every day, a building from a robot that walks it. But I don't think I really think that the value of the platform is only there once you can turn the images into something structured like progress or quality checking or something.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you've just got mountains of images to go through. And like you've probably seen, like even on the best projects, like on bad projects, you have very little records of what's happening on site. But even on good projects, you have like lots of images attached to site diaries or whatever. But just to go through all that and find it is, it's like too much. It's almost like too much information. So I totally believe in the space, but I think it needs to get to like this end point or like some progress point before it's something that gets like real, like I think is really valuable.
I once had to dig out a photo from site and I had to rummage through site diaries, like folders. And obviously every photo is labeled the like IMG_67268. So you literally have to open every single one just to work out where it is or who it is or when. Absolute nightmare.
We can cut this bit or leave it in, but we had a chap on night shift on a project like 10 years ago, and he was doing the site diaries, recording the progress overnight, and for many months was getting like slightly like, people on night shift can go a little bit crazy. Yeah. And the site diaries deteriorated to like at one point he was just taking photos of his boots on the ground, being like, these are my boots, and attaching that to the site diary, or writing messages in there like, the useless steel fixers didn't turn up again, but no one's going to read this ever anyway. And then eventually like took it another step further and got fired. But for a while it was quite funny.
That's why we get so many requests for a site diary app, right?
Yeah. That's it.
Right, so next up, we have, and I've got quite a funny note here. It says Aleco PLC / Aleco Software GmbH / Power Project / Asta. Pretty hard to name these guys, but I guess the summary is there's a company that owns a subsidiary, which is the company that provides Power Project, which is a common master schedule tool for predominantly the building industry. So this company has been sold to a German company for a sum of 600K. We'll move on to that valuation at the end, maybe. What do you think this means for the users of Asta Power Project?
I think it means nothing for Asta Power Project. So the actual story is that when I was reading it, is the parent company that owns Power Project it's actually, this piece of software that's been sold is like one small piece of like quite dated like CAD 2D 3D drawing software. It's like a really bad version of SketchUp. But like what I think
5 products, right? And I only really recognize this one.
No,
was it more?
So if you go to if you look at and this is indicative of like the construction software industry, This is like one piece of software out of 17 that Electrosoft owns.
Right.
Yeah, it's another. It's like an example of how so many construction software companies are just like vast collections of isolated tools rather than a single platform. Like, and I think it also ties like what is wrong with the construction software space. And yeah, I think a lot of the time they'll like a company will buy a smaller company or a tool or something that's got some traction, revenue, and then they'll just sort of put it with their collection of other tools and not spend any time or effort to integrate it with the rest of the things that they have. Like if you think about that, Carlos, compared to like what the tools we use as a technology business, if any of the platforms we use had some product or part of their offering that wasn't connected to the rest of it, it would be like laughable. But that's the state of play and the norm for like a lot of construction platform. Like as an example, you take Bentley, right? If you go to the Bentley website and then go to their products section and then go view all products, you'll find that they have a product catalog of software that has 12 products per page, and they have 12 pages.
What?
It's like hundreds
wow.
of pieces of software that Bentley own, and they've just like acquired and acquired over time, and so little of it is actually connected with other pieces of it. And that's why things like Procore that are taking a proper like modern approach to a single platform where things are connected with each other. And if you release a new module, the RFI module talks to the site diary, like that's just a completely different approach to the way that it is in the construction industry. And like as an industry, how do you expect construction companies and contractors to make sense of 144 products, right? Number one. And then like number two, how do you expect them to adopt such like a disjointed mess of rubbish? So yeah,
like are you selling, do you have sales team for each? Are you selling a bundle? Do you then onboard each one? That's a nightmare, right?
Well, not to mention that many of these people outsource their like selling function to like partners. So you end up with like a third party reseller going, here's the catalog of 144 pieces of software alongside all the other vendors worth of software in their catalog. Which ones do you want? It's like it's the worst buying experience ever.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a thought on the sale of this software. It seems like a fairly small dated piece of software, but it did rile me up about construction software in general and like what a mess it is.
Yeah, it reminds me of the old stuff we used to use on projects 10 to 15 years ago, and it's sort of just sat there and that developed. The thing that stood out for me though was they sold that part of the business for 600K, a business that claims to have 100,000 users. That seems wild to me. Like there must be something.
The software that they sold had 100,000, or the parent company did?
The subsidiary, the Eleco Software GmbH, the subsidiary that they sold to the German company, that set of software claims to have 100,000 users, and they sold it for 600,000 euros. So something's not right there.
But I don't know if you looked at it, but it's in a category where there's like massive. It's in the like 3D modeling. There are
too much competition.
There are so many good offerings coming onto the market. Yeah. Either you're gonna spend millions in development you basically start again. But yeah, I don't know why someone buys it other than the residual revenue before people switch off it.
Yeah. Right. So Hinkley Point C. Hard to read the news at the moment and not keep coming across Hinkley Point C. There's obviously a lot going on. This week, there's an article detailing EDF's enterprise GIS system, which was developed and delivered by Esri. And it's a geospatial portal for the project. And they claim to sort of pull together things like spatial maps, apps, dashboards, all of this information into one sort of hub to give everyone access to this information. Jason, sounds simple and great, but I guess what's the reality behind this and collecting that sort of volume of data to put it in one spot?
I guess I'd be interested to know your thoughts on this. You spend a lot of time every day talking to teams, integrating their like GIS tools with our software, and you've got more exposure to how teams are using it. So I think, yeah, I'd be interested in what your take is.
Yeah, so whenever we speak to the sort of larger projects, it's generally the larger ones that have systems like GIS. It's not really found on small £5 million jobs. You end up with lots of different departments who never speak to each other, who all own their own sort of data set and are feeding one part of the project, like in their own little world. So firstly, we have a meeting with the GIS team. It's like they've never met anyone outside of their dusty little office before. It's quite like a siloed set of teams. So I can imagine that sort of job. You're going to have tons of consultants who are basically guaranteeing work for the next 10 years, because it's not this sort of, from my understanding and my experience, it's not this automated flow of lots of data into a bucket and everyone accesses it and it's nice and seamless and easy and done. There'll be massive teams behind it actually pulling this together. So yeah, the output sounds great, to actually have a hub that pulls all this stuff together. So they're turning what could be 8 pots of information, for example, into one. But how up to date, relevant, and seamless the data is, and the sort of process of actually pulling together and keeping it current, I have no idea how they'll actually deliver on a project that big.
Like the illusion of something automated, but behind the scenes there's like 100 people on treadmills like making it work.
Yeah, we've spoken to a couple of projects recently, and just to get like drone imagery into Apex, because obviously we pull through that data, there's like 6 guys that have then committing X hours per week to convert information or the data types, and it just seems nuts that it's not just an API that's set up and it's done and it's there and that's feeding forever.
What's super interesting is like going back to what we were talking about before with the like reality capture thing, and we were talking about hunting back through images of the site, like site diaries, and trying to work out where the information is. In construction, the concept of like structuring information geographically as like that is the primary way to get to data is makes a bunch of sense and is super, super valuable. It breaks down so many barriers. You can layer so much other information over that. Like you could have schedule performance, you could have like plans, you could have the design, you could have the as-built records or the reality capture. Like if it's geographically structured, the retrieval of that information, like one of the massive problems with getting to the information is like retrieving the stuff that you actually need.
Like you want time and location stamp, basically, don't you? So it's all pinned to the right spot at the right time.
Having stuff geographically organized and accessible in a platform is massive for information retrieval and construction. And then this kind of ties together like the 3 things we talked about actually, because so having the information capture, that links to like the importance of like geographic organization of data for retrieval. But then the reason it's hard to get to that is because so many of the tools that people use for different bits of the information are like these standalone products, right? So someone might have a cost value reporting system that's done in a desktop piece of software that needs to import a spreadsheet from something else and then output a spreadsheet over here. So to get the information actually in this one, so they're using Esri's system. That's a fairly like accessible platform. We can integrate with it like quite easily. But if you've got a piece of desktop software or something that runs in a spreadsheet sat on someone's computer on their C drive in an office somewhere, that's not accessible. So this like proliferation of, or this historical set of like tools that are not connected with each other make the putting that information together in one spot really hard for contractors.
Yeah, definitely. And then also just you've got different teams and reports driven off different data sets when it's not pooled. So like on Crossrail within project controls, there's this report called QURR, which is like quantity unit rate report. And it's basically how much have you done times a rate times, so the rate, how much you've done, and then that works out progress against things like concrete, against the WBS, which then drives the overall value from the project. Yep. And because there was no method of capture for that, the project controls person would go do a lap of site and write down stuff. So they're doing that. You've got the QSs going out, looking at stuff, deciding how much they're going to pay, and every single department has got a completely different number. Nothing ties up, and then you spend 3 weeks arguing about whether the data is accurate rather than what it actually means. It's yeah.
But if you think about like, then if you apply the fact that there's so many like disconnected, like isolated systems, okay, maybe the QS goes out and like estimates how much was done, but probably for some other like tracking spreadsheet somewhere, the engineer's probably doing the same thing. And then probably somewhere else, like a quality person is doing the same thing. So like, it really just, if there was a single platform or it just goes to show the power of like having something like a platform that's in the cloud, because the data can move between systems automatically. Yeah, because not only is it like such a ridiculously manual process.
Yeah.
But it guaranteed it's being done 3 times. You know.
Yeah. And each of these vendors are going to be pitching these productivity gains, but if they're individual, what gain are you really going to get? It's
Yep.
Right.
Just to like close the loop on that, right? Like, you think about I just think about like our product and like scheduling. Yeah, we deal with like helping engineers build their schedule, but if you think about the other spreadsheets that engineers complete, like the amount of things they have to do, they'll have to complete some register of like out of hours working for like a community team. They'll have to complete a schedule of like concrete demand for like a concrete batch plant. And they'll have spreadsheet after spreadsheet. One's for like a safety team of like high risk activities. All that information is duplicating information that would be in a schedule. And so like one of the things that we've intentionally done is made it so you can just attach that information to your schedule, and then it can be output in a format. You do it once. And yeah, there's just a million examples in construction of like the same thing being done 3 times.
Yeah, definitely. And to detach the examples you've just given, so how much concrete you need from a batching plant or how much labor you need, to detach any of that from a schedule is also crazy, right? I don't know how things can function without the sort of time element attached to it, because that's everything.
In construction, everything should be attached to both schedule and the location. And I think if you do that, you eliminate like so much busy work. Having everything attached to a geographic location and a schedule. If your cost forecasting was properly attached to the schedule, like properly attached, not there's a schedule with some reference back to it, so that whenever the planners eventually once a month update the schedule, will get the like properly attached in a system where they talk to each other. Yeah.
And the kind of where BIM wanted to go, potentially is going. But the problem I was found with BIM was it was always 3 or 4 months behind. It's like this retrospective thing that they're sort of pulling together behind, rather than it actually being used to look forward or plan. That could have changed in the last 5 years since I've been involved heavily, but yeah, that's what I should be doing.
So you just If you're going to slag off BIM, stick with it. Don't back away from it.
Yeah, we all know what happened to BIM anyway. Right, that's all we've got time for today. As always, thank you very much for listening.